we can't allow the country to default. My guess is we'll bump up right against that. You may see a couple of temporary extensions, but ultimately it will get done. But the price for that getting done will be some real fiscal reform, perhaps including broad-based tax reform, somewhat along the lines that Alice was mentioning. The Democrats will have to be willing to say, look, we'll agree to some spending caps going forward. The Republicans perhaps will have to agree to a reform of the tax code that will reward investment, savings, make it more efficient, get the corporate rate down to make it more globally competitive, but at the same time will generate more revenue for the government. So there are agreements and compromises there to be made, but the overall political environment right now, and through my father, I've been around, for the process for a long time. I've never, with the exception of the 1960s, during the time of the Vietnam War, some racial tensions, those sorts of things, I can't recall the political environment being as polarized and as difficult as it is today. So that will make progress more difficult. But exogenous events will force progress. There will be episodically occasions when enlightened self-interest on the part of both parties will lead them to strike compromises. For example, in my legislature when I was governor, the Democrats controlled a few years, the Republicans controlled a few years, it was split a few years. People who are in power, the Democrats control the White House and the Senate, the Republicans now control the House, are held accountable. And so it's not, you just can't, howl at the moon, you can't just make, prognostications without some grounding in substance. So I think that pretty quickly both sides will see there's an election coming up. Even though they disagree on most things, it's going to be in their enlightened self-interest to get a few things done. With regard to the topic of innovation, I would say, Don't Ask, Don't Tell is coming up for renewal. There's some prospect there for some progress on education reform.
No Child Left Behind.
No Child Left Behind.
I'm sorry, No Child Left Behind. What did I say?
Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
I was going to get that from it. No Child Left Behind. I was going to say, on the area of immigration reform, we're not going to have the DREAM Act or something, broad-based immigration reform, but perhaps something on ensuring that the brightest inventors and entrepreneurs can come to our country and remain in our country. You could see some progress on that. Green energy. I think there's the Republicans will want us to be more energy independent, less dependent on imports of oil. Democrats will like the implications for CO2. So there's some progress there to be made. Protecting intellectual property, which at the end of the day, if you can innovate all you want to. If other people steal your ideas, it doesn't benefit you economically quite so much. So perhaps a more rigorous regime of intellectual property protection. There are some things where the sides can come together, even if the overarching narrative is one that's pretty disagreeable.